respond to any questions specific, or have staff respond to your questions.
Any questions for Dr. Alonso? Okay, just a few items to note. Page 6, those are budget adjustment items, and that will keep a cumulative total during the year.
That's correct.
Moving on to page 7, the first line of numbers under budget adjustments and reclassifications, that $21,392,000. Will you explain that, please?
On page 7?
Yeah. I think that's the UB carry forward.
Oh, yes. That is, excuse me, that is the, what we call or refer to as UB, which is the carry forward authority that we have. When we presented the budget to you in July, and you adopted the budget for FY10, the UBs were estimated, and since the closing of the books, we have come back and adjusted to the actual, and that is what is reflected in that page, in that column. Dan, did I?
I guess, are you interested in the magnitude of the number, or
just what it was?
Just what it was.
Was it mostly be on time?
Mostly be on time and Texas grant, but primarily be on time.
Okay. And was that because we had just held up on funding that at the back end, if I remember right, Dan?
Well, we made only renewal awards in FY08, FY09, while we were accumulating
tuition
ever-increasing more tuition set-asides. So.
And moving on to page 9, that's a page that Dr. Alonso will actually talk about in the next agenda item, so you may want to keep your booklet turned to that page. That's the new ARA funds that are coming in. And then page 10 and 11 are loan funds and debt summary. So, any other questions, comments for Dr. Alonso?
On page 6, the two most substantive negative adjustments were on the license plate scholarships and the and you just addressed the adjustment of the UB, I guess. What was the, was that also the same explanation for the license plate scholarships? Why was that UB'd?
This is not a UB necessarily. These are, when we provide the budget in July, there are a number of estimates that are included in the budget. These are the actuals. So we're providing you that differential of what we estimated those to be, which is usually prescriptive from the LBB. They instruct us on what the estimates are going to be, and then we actually provide the actual amount of UB that is reflected in these adjustment numbers.
So these, the negative 387 and the negative 558 were just actual revenue underran estimated?
Correct.
From those two items?
Correct.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 5A. Is consideration of adopting staff recommendation amending the fiscal year 2010 operating budget to incorporate the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act funds. I think we are affectionately referring to them as ARA funds. Is that correct?
Or non-affectionately, maybe.
Okay.
That is correct.
Dr. Alonso.
Thank you, Madam Chair. While this agenda item is to request an amendment to the FY10 operating budget, I would like to take a few minutes to provide the committee with some brief background information on the ARA funds and our role in administering these funds. Texas received approximately $4 billion in what they call state fiscal stabilization funds under the ARA Act that were awarded to the governor's office and were appropriated by the legislature in Article 12. TEA was designated as the prime recipient for 82% of those funds, and the coordinating board was designated as the prime for the remaining 18%, or to be exact, $723,165,683. And that's what when Brenda mentioned a while ago, page 9, that's the figure that you will see there. We were, throughout the session, anticipating that we would have to administer and be responsible for approximately $80 million, which is the amount that was appropriated in our bill pattern for incentive funding. As the session drew to a close, we perhaps thought that maybe we would have to administer maybe the formula funding for the community colleges, maybe the HRIs, the health-related, but in no case, in no circumstance were we prepared for what was to come on August 28th, when I was called down to the governor's office and told that we would be responsible for administering, both physically and administratively, the entire government services funds, which is where this 18% fall into. And so not only is the amount much more than what we had anticipated, but our responsibility now includes administering funds that are outside the scope of the coordinating board. Of particular challenge to us are the section, what we now refer to as Section 25, which is one of the riders under Article 12, which includes approximately 39 items that we normally call special items or exceptional items. Included in some of those items are items that are not education related at all. And we'll be glad to go over that if you need us to. From the onset, we knew that these funds would carry with them a heightened level of attention, not only because of the large dollar amount, but also because the funds came with additional reporting and monitoring requirements that are in addition to the standard federal requirements. The Commissioner made it very clear from the beginning that we would administer the ARA funds in a manner that will ensure full compliance with the law and the regulations and minimize exposure of audit findings. We are very mindful here at the staff here at the coordinating board is very mindful that the award, though administered by us, is awarded to the governor's office, and any missteps will reflect on Texas. Between August 28th and August 30th, we assemble a team of current CB staffers to develop guidelines, terms and conditions, an application process, and everything else necessary to get the funds out to the institutions and to the other state agencies. Under the coordination of Mark Zafiro, our interim ARA coordinator, we were able to post the required documents on our website by October 1, the deadline that we had given ourselves, a mere 33 days after we were notified of our responsibility. I might note that people have asked me how Mark ended up being our interim ARA coordinator. He has the unfortunate circumstance of officing next to me, and when I step out in the hall, he's the first person I saw, and I said, "Mark, get in here, you are not the new ARA coordinator." But seriously, I want to publicly state that I am very, very proud and very pleased with Mark, along with the rest of the staff, have stepped up and responded to the challenges that we have before us. Approximately 15 staff have contributed to our efforts at any one time. They spend long hours in order to accomplish what we had to do in the short time frame that we had. All of them, and this is important, did this without any relief on their assigned day-to-day activities. So, in other words, the ARA activities were on top of what they had to do without being provided any relief on those duties. And if I can say so myself, again, Madam Chair, I'd like to brag on the staff because I think it's justifiable. They have done a tremendous job given the short time frame and the complexity of what we were handed on August 28th. And even more significant than that, I think, is the fact that what they have done and what they continue to do has been in the absence of solid federal guidelines and information coming from Washington, because it has been a work in progress for everybody, and so many of the questions that we have asked, many of the guidance that we have sought, they still don't have the answers. And so we're still waiting for that, but we're putting together the best that we can. We continue to work with the governor's office and the budget leadership at the Capitol to explore alternate funding structures so that we can get the funds out to the institutions as fast as possible, and as I said earlier, to minimize the exposure of possible audit findings. The first round of applications from the institutions is due to us on October 30th. We are bracing ourselves for the applications that will hit our website within the next week or so, and we are bracing ourselves for the task that is associated with the review of those applications. My instructions to the staff have been that no notice of grant awards will be issued until and only if we do a rigorous review of the applications and we have reasonable assurances that the use of the funds will comply with all the RR requirements. We will track the expenditures, as your chair has already mentioned, and report it to the board on a quarterly basis via the quarterly financial report, where we have developed that structure specific to ARA funds. I would like to conclude my brief remarks on this on a positive note. Not that the rest of it is not positive, it's just that it's been exhausting. We have identified a very well-qualified permanent coordinator. Nobody can be happier about this than Mark. He is a gentleman that I did not know was in Austin. I had knowledge of his work when I was in College Station. He applied for the position, and he comes to us with a wealth of experience, both in higher education and in federal funds, having managed research federal funds at UT Dallas, and then for me at A&M. And I'm happy to report that he will be with us starting November 5th. Staff and I will be glad to respond to any specific questions, the breakdown, or any other specific questions that you may have.
Madam Chair, Arturo, I understand the $723 million. That's well explained. What I'm trying to understand is on the adjusted amount to the existing budget, we only deducted $40 million of the incentive funds.
Yes, because the $80 million is the second year of the biennium, so you have approved $40 million of it in this current year,
right.
In this current budget.
Does that mean, which leads me to my second question, does that mean that every other dollar outside of incentive funding is front-end loaded in the first year of the biennium? I'm sorry, Fred, I guess I'm not understanding. Are all the remaining
incentive funds?
Aside from the $80 million in incentive funds, which I understand was
Right.
split over both years of the biennium, are the other $643 million all front-end loaded in the first year of the biennium, and that's why they're being added to fiscal year 10?
I think they're available currently. The federal program is a 2-year cycle, so if institution doesn't apply for whatever reason, they still have up until August 31st of 2011.
So we have the potential to distribute all those funds.
Yes.
In this year, we'll carry over whatever isn't applied for or distributed.
That is correct.
Okay.
Mr. Zafira, is it true that you're affectionately or unaffectionately, your nickname is Zara?
Well, I've heard it mentioned a couple times in the halls, but I did want to make one point. Dr. Alonzo said that, I was the first one that bumped into him in the hallway when he was looking for somebody to do this. I might add that I'm a T-SIP, so I really think he targeted me intentionally. And
What better reason could there be?
I don't know. So there it is. Anyway, it's
It'll
been
look good on your resume.
Yeah, it will. Yeah, I'm going to need that. But It's been a real pleasure working with the staff that have assisted me with this interim coordination of this fund. They are really excellent professionals, and they've done a great job. And we have a real challenge ahead of us, so I'm looking forward to the new director coming in.
Well, I mean, this is obviously quite an undertaking. I know it's been a moving target. It's required a lot of work. Frankly, I think your recognition of your staff today is a most appropriate use of time for this committee. I also want to express my thank you to your folks for what they've done so far and what they're going to continue to do. So thank you. And this is an action item, so it does require our approval. May I have a motion, please?
So move.
So moved by Mr. Heldenfels.
Second.
Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you.
you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is 5B, adopting staff recommendation to approve an interagency contract between the Coordinating Board and the Office of the Attorney General for the litigation and collection of delinquent student loans for 2010-2011 biennium. We have Dr. Alonzo, Mr. Franz, and Mr. Weaver will present this item.
I will briefly say just a couple things. We've been working on this contract with the Office of the Attorney General for about a year now on this proposed transfer of the duties and the staff to their office. As most of you know, the Attorney General represents the Coordinating Board in all phases of litigation. And as we worked with them, we came to the realization that this transfer will result in increased efficiencies, more effective collections. It is what I really am firmly convinced that will serve the public good. We think it's a good move. We seek your support, and as you say, either Bill and Dan, who have been very instrumental in working with the Attorney General on this, are here to answer any specific questions.
Questions?
Net budget impact?
We're expecting to be cost neutral this year. Fundamentally, we're shifting salaries out of the loan program operations and turning them into operating expenses for the loan program.
Okay, this is also an action item requiring approval. May I have a motion, please?
Return Wallace. So moved. Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is 5C, consideration of adopting staff recommendation relating to the certification of Texas Research Incentive Program, otherwise known as TRIP, funds to the emerging research universities. Susan Brown will present this item. I believe there's a handout and a slide presentation.
There is a handout, and we had one of the slides that had a wrong number on it, and it has now been corrected. So it will be corrected in the handout you get tomorrow. It is corrected in my notes and on the presentation. Next slide. HB 51 was passed during this legislative session, signed by the governor, and that is where the TRIP program came from. The staff worked with the institutions in July and got together some rules. Those were put out. You'll be voting on those tomorrow. They went to the Strategic Planning and Policy Committee in September. The allocation of the funds, because the institutions each have 30 days from the date their funds are deposited, these funds could not go to the September meeting, and that's why they're coming to this. They will be on the Strategic Planning and Policy agenda tomorrow also for final vote. TRIP funds have to be research-based. They are set up to match research funds received by the institutions. They can be endowed chairs, research facilities, equipment, anything that is research-based, graduate student fellowships, that sort of thing. It cannot be used for any type of undergraduate stipends. That's a very important process. The way we receive the funds is institutions were submitted to the coordinating board the deposit slip, the fully executed donor agreements, and what we did is we verified the date of deposit. We looked at the donor agreement to make sure it met the criteria as set forth in the statute. Any of those that were questionable, we went back to the institution, asked for clarification on some. A few of those were denied. We met with the commissioner, deputy commissioner, and those we had questions on. Bill Franz, general counsel, reviewed, and that was kind of the process of how we did it. The TRIP program only has $25 million for fiscal year 10. We had over $48 million. Next slide. Sorry about that. Next slide is actually the percentage, and this is set out in statute. Sorry about that. For any gift that was received that had under $1 million, it was a 50% match. $1 to $2 million was 75% match. $2 million up to $10 million was 100% match. That part was in the statute, so there was not any leeway as far as the board's concerned on that one. It's strictly on the certification of did they meet the research requirement. Here's the slide I was talking about. We actually had $48.8 million submitted on September 1st. Since we only have, and that was.
Say that again, I'm sorry.
We had there was $48.8 million of gifts received and deposited by the 7 institutions on September 1st. Okay. We only have $25 million available. So that is the eligible amount. The $48.8 million is the eligible match amount. You will see that prorated amount, and that is how much will be distributed, if y'all approve this, distributed to the institutions. It may be Monday before it goes out, but that will be getting distributed to the institutions. That is important because that was September 1, and in the statute, we have to go in date order. So go on to the next slide. We have since...
Was there an error on that slide we just saw?
No, the slide's right, your handout's wrong.
Well,
on the Texas Tech...
can you point out which one on our slide,
Yes.
on our handout is wrong? I didn't catch it on the slide.
Okay.
Or go back a slide.
We'll go back.
Oh,
Oh,
there it is.
that's
Oh,
the right
it's
slide.
it's the
That's the
Texas
slide.
Tech.
Texas Tech is different. That changed the total.
The 10909-802.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And I will be giving y'all new handouts tomorrow.
but that's the only number that changed?
No, because of that number changed, the proration changed because
Yeah,
the total number
yeah.
went up.
That's what okay.
So that's where it changed. That was the change. All of those funds were on September 1. This slide shows what has come in since then. Because we've already gone over the $25 million, we have not reviewed these yet to determine whether or not they're matching, and we actually got one that was submitted yesterday for $1.35 million, which obviously we still don't have the donor agreement. They sent in just the deposit slip. If all of these are eligible, the $50 million is gone, is the bottom line on that one. And like I said, we have not gone into those yet.
Quick. I want to make sure, you say in date order.
In date order.
So in other words,
Anything that was received September 1.
so if we would have received 50 million 9/1
Gone.
and Tech had 50% and they were certified, then they get 50% this year plus they get the carryover to
Correct.
the next year in the biennium.
Correct. So there's 23 or 24, roughly 24 million, 23.9 or 0.1 million, that actually is the September 1, came in on September 1, but we cannot fund it until FY11. And then if you look at the rest of these matches and the 1.35 million that came in yesterday, if all of those really are eligible, the 50 million is gone. However, what we have told the institutions is to continue to send in any gifts that they think match the matching criteria for TRIP. We will continue to review those and just keep a log in date order, because if the legislature comes up with additional funds in 2012, because it is in date order, we will just keep kind of going down the line.
I got you. Okay. Thank you. Was that 135 received yesterday from one institution? or-
Yes, that was from one institution, UT San Antonio.
Out of curiosity.
Like I said, we have not yet even gotten the donor agreement from them, and then they have 30 days to submit that.
Out of curiosity, do you have any clarity on just generally of the gifts that were targeted to a certain, whether buildings or?
This next slide, right here, we have 24.6 went to endowed chairs, 11 to just general research, and all it had to say was research. They didn't have to specify. We have some publications and graduate fellowships. In the next slide. This shows the distribution by area. Other includes, looks kind of weird to have general research. Those are the ones that don't specify. Other includes law, sociology, history, chemistry, public administration, communications, liberal arts, and optometry. All of those are grouped into the other category. So those are the uses.
That's one thing. Madam Chair, could I ask a direct question to the Commissioner? I'm just curious, Commissioner, when you look at the trip uses chart and how this money's going to be spent, half of it on endowed chairs, and this is really more of an education question for me, but if you looked at mature research institutions and you looked at how that money's being allocated in those institutions, would this be indicative of that in terms of how that money's being allocated?
No, I would guess that this amount for endowed chairs is greater than one would typically find, but that's also an indication that these are emerging research universities and not mature ones. But it's you would think that the first place they would start would be to strengthen their faculty. And endowed chairs are one of the areas that it's least difficult to raise money for. People are generally willing to talk about having a chair named after them.
Yeah.
For example, I'd love to see a Raymond Paredes chair in English at any one of a number of it.
May I ask a follow-up question to yours, Mr. Chairman? And that is, if in a perfect world, would this have been how you recommended, Commissioner,
That's right.
that the funds be distributed? And is this something for next legislative session, should they relook at refunding, allocating more funds to TRIP, is there any recommendations we can make on how to prioritize where these dollars go?
Well, no, I don't think we can do that as a board. I think institutions have different characteristics and different priorities. For myself, I'd like to see a better balance among research, endowed chairs, and graduate student fellowships.
Okay.
Thank you.
Questions? Being none?
Question about the facilities. What's indicative of a research facility, and are there metrics or guidelines as to what that is?
Some of those were for, one was a behavioral science where they provide the two-way mirrors when they're watching, interaction with children, that sort of thing. There was another one that, if I remember correctly, had building some labs out in a building.
Okay, so there's very specific.
Some of them are very specific, and some of them said for research purposes. It just kind of depended on the donor and that sort of thing.
It's almost impossible, though, after the fact, once the money's been given and they earmark it for research, to really ever go back and see if that was exclusively how it was used, though.
It would be difficult. The donors, a lot of the donors, though, will go back and make sure that
But in terms
their
of the money that comes from the state.
This money that comes from the state actually, and this is kind of a little ironic twist, does not have to go into research. It just says it gets matched based on donations. It does not say they have to spend the state money on research in the statute. I think everybody is very aware that was probably the intent, and but it is not specified in the statute.
So by essence of the word matching, that doesn't constitute a linkage?
Well, and some of the donor agreements specified that their understanding is that the matching amount from the state would increase the endowment or would increase the stipends. Some of the donors put that in there, but it was not as part of the statute.
Is our role in the legislation limited to certifying and determining the prorated allocations? In other words,
Yes.
are we responsible for monitoring how this money gets spent?
No.
The buck flows through here.
Yes. Flows through out to the institutions.
That's true. That's exactly right.
But yes, that is something we might, for our next legislative session, ask for a little more guidance in that area.
If I could add one thing in terms of that, I think that from the institutional perspective, since their ultimate goal is to become a Tier 1 institution, that I think they would be well served, and I think they understand they would be well served by putting dollars into areas that would result in them getting additional external research dollars. And so I think while it isn't explicit, that if they really understand the target set forward within the bill in terms of the number of external research dollars and a number of other things, that if they exercise good judgment in terms of that goal, they'll understand that they need to spend those dollars in that kind of way.
I would be surprised if the money did not go into research, but it doesn't specify.
No further questions. May I have a motion, please?
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Agenda item 5D is on the committee consent calendar. We will move on to agenda item 5E. Consideration of adopting the Commissioner's recommendation for amendments to Section 1.16 of Board Rules concerning contracts and grants for materials and services. I believe Mr. Franz is presenting this item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This item is simply two amendments to Rule 1.16 of the Board Rules that reflect, one, the restructuring of the board committees that has been undertaken over the last few months, and number two, and this was part of this, what you see in front of you, number two is to add the pertinent committee chair to the now proposed trio of voters, the chair, the vice chair, and the pertinent committee chair on any contract that is ultimately achieved with the selected vendor. And that part of this rule was not published in the Texas Register. I made the decision, after discussing it with the chairman, that it really was not a material change to our rules, and as a result did not need to be published, but could be adopted along with the other proposed change, which was indeed published in the Texas Register. And staff recommends, of course, the proposed changes to Board Rule 1.16.
Okay, thank you. Question or comments?
Were any comments received?
There were no comments received.
What happens when the pertinent committee chair is also the vice chairman?
At that point, it's a...
I get 2 votes?
Sure.
I never even thought about that.
I'm sorry, what?
In other words, if it's the Strategic Planning and Policy Committee
Right.
that is entering into an agreement ultimately, or approving the entering into an agreement ultimately with any particular vendor, Mr. Heldenfels would not only be the vice chair, but also the chair of that committee. So as the pertinent chair, he would be nominally the third voting member, but in this case, it would still be, at that point, just the chair and the vice chair voting on that issue, as opposed to if the contract was coming through agency operations, then Ms. Pavich, of course, you would be the vote, and Ms. Mendoza likewise if it were in her committee.
Oh, yeah. Lucky us. All right. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Agenda item 5F is on the consent calendar. We move on to agenda item G, consideration of request for the purchase of materials or services in excess of $100,000 and less than $750,000. Agenda item 5G2 is consideration of a request. Yes, 5G1 is on the consent calendar, excuse me. So on the back page is 5G2.
Move approval.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. Thank you. Move on to the auditing section.
It's better. It's,
Agenda item 6.1 was considered earlier. We move on to agenda item 6B, consideration of approval of the annual internal audit report for fiscal year '09, risk assessment and audit work plan, fiscal year 2010. Mr. Tegby will present this item.
Thank you very much, ma'am. The item 6B is the approval of the annual internal audit report, the risk assessment and audit plan for FY010. We have sent the item to you on the separate package, and there's a small revision that I had to make to the internal audit report, and that was contained in a 3-page document that was given to you this afternoon. The internal audit annual report is at the back of the package that was mailed to you. I know it is a large document which is about 70 pages long. I am not going to read everything, and I'm not going to assume that you had the opportunity to read everything. So what I intend to do is to highlight some of the important areas. The report is a report that we are required to provide to the State Auditor's Office, the Governor's Office, LBB, and the Sunset Commission. The report basically summarizes all the internal audit activities for the year. We can turn to page 1, which is the update of the FY 2009 internal audit work plan. And Mr. Edenfeld, I know that last year when I presented, you asked for the actual hours for the audit project. We have provided those hours this year in the first section of the report under the completed and ongoing projects. In the last column, I provided C, which represent completed and ongoing.
Wait, I think that's page 1?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Page 1.
Yeah.
It is the numbered page.
Numbered page 1.
Yeah. I'm sorry. Okay. There are some deviations from the work plan, and the reasons for the deviations are explained are noted with the note 1 to 4, and they are explained on page 2. The note 1 is concerning the hours for institutional financial aid and enrollment audit. We had excessive hours there. We spent 2,232 against 1,400 hours that I budgeted. I guess it was because I underestimated the hours, maybe because I did underestimate the amount of work and the complexity of what is involved, because as we went into those audits, we found that this is an area that has never been audited in the history of the agency. So the planning aspect of the audit took excessive number of hours, but we have learned from that experience, and that the appropriate adjustment has been made on the FY 210 that we will share towards the end of the report. Note 2 is under the management request, because we received some requests for investigations by the State Auditor's Office, and we also spent some hours on a financial reporting project that was given to us by this committee. And
what was the State Auditor's request?
I didn't hear. Did you say what, sir?
What was the management request from the State Auditor's Office?
They involved some investigations, sir, that we had to look into on their behalf, and then we had to send the reports to them.
How many of those, Tony, did we get from the State Auditor's Office?
Last for 09, it was a total of, I think, I'd say 4. And if there's no question on that page, on the division, we can go to the next section, which is the report of the external quality assurance review of the internal audit department. We are required to do external peer review, and the report that you're looking at is the one that was done in 2004. At this moment, we are undergoing the peer review, and our plan is that the review will be completed by the end of this year, and we will bring the report to you at the January meeting. The next segment is a list of all the audits that we completed, and they are contained on pages 11 to 41. These are these are the recommendations that you have seen during the year. Basically, what we did was to cut and pasted them into the format that was required by the State Auditor's Office.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Tony.
Yes, sir.
Are any of these assessments been done subsequent to other ones we've seen? In other words, have we seen all of these in prior meetings?
Yes, sir.
There's not any new recommendations in here that have not come before this committee?
There is no new recommendation. Basically, the one that we don't have anything, because all these are the recommendations up to the end of August 31. So you have seen everything.
Thank you.
Yes,
Madam Chair. Thank you. Madam Chair.
Yes.
On the very last page, well, actually, I'm sorry, I'm jumping to page 42, the review of data security of the Texas Schools Project. That was a sort of a consulting engagement.
Yes, sir.
Where on your chart were those hours captured? Because I didn't see a line item with that description.
Oh, okay.
Can you tell me how many hours were spent on that in 2009?
That is on line number 15, sir.
Educational Research Center
Yes, sir.
is where those hours?
Yes, sir. Then page 44, section 8, that is the revision that was contained in the 3-page document that was given to you this afternoon. It's the section that we are required by the state auditors to report activities actions that we have taken to implement requirement on reporting suspected fraud and abuse within the agency.
Okay, so it talks about how you would report if you
Yes, ma'am.
fraud and abuse. It's not saying that you uncovered any.
No, it is the framework that we do have in place.
Okay. We can go on to.
Okay, we could go to the FY 2010 internal audit work plan, which is on page 45. The first section is the institutional audits that we plan on spending on 2,550 hours. What we've done is to break the intended audits into the type of institutions. Our plan is to do two community colleges, independent colleges and university, 2 public university, 2 of them, and 8 related institutions, one of them. The hours are totally different from FY09, and we feel comfortable that we will not have overages that as we've experienced in the past. And we arrived at the hours after conducting a survey after I met with the chair and the executive management, and we came to the conclusion that 400 hours for financial aid and enrollment audits appears to be reasonable, and for institutions that are independent colleges and universities, 250 hours should be adequate for financial aid.
Well, I just want to clarify a statement you made. Yes, you did turn this into the chair, but I don't think I made a recommendation or was involved in the estimate of the 400 hours. I did ask you to benchmark, to use some sort of benchmark to estimate these hours, since we are doing some of this work for the first time.
Yes,
so we're relying on your estimation based on benchmark and your prior experience.
Okay.
Can you talk a little bit about the benchmark and the process?
The benchmark consisting of a survey that I took I contacted the State Auditor's Office and some other 3 institutions, and at the same time I talked to Susan Warren of KPMG. State Auditor's Office spent 500 hours, 250 for financial aid and 250 hours for their enrollment audit. And KPMG said for their financial enrollment audit, they normally estimate 375 hours. and the other institutions, some spend 500 hours, some 400 hours. So I just decided, based on that 400 hours should be a reasonable estimate.
What about benchmarking for the the ARA funds, since that's, you know, a new area for us? And like last year, we had a new area, and we spent 60% more hours than we estimated. How do we get a comfort level with this benchmark?
ARA is a different animal by itself, that there is nobody who has been able to wrap their hand around it. So we will just have to go do it, go as learn as we go. I met with the ARA steering committee of internal auditors last week, and we all came up with some audit program and questionnaire that they are strongly recommending that we use and take a proactive approach, so that we can sort of audit ourselves ahead of the OIG. So if and when OIG comes back, we can always say that we have audited this area, and that audit program and questionnaire, we have not tested it. So what I'll do, if I get to a point that the 400 hours is not enough, I will let you know.
The last question I had was that I noticed that your program has 209 more hours than you'd estimated or programmed for last year. Certainly, that's only a tenth of an FTE. Is that coming from overtime? Where are we gaining those 209 hours since we're not adding personnel?
Oh, the reason for that is because last year the IT auditor did not come on board until middle of November.
Okay.
That's why.
So you'll have that person for a full year?
Yeah, that's why.
I had a comment and potentially a recommendation for a change on the institutional audits. Right now, it looks like you've budgeted 2 community colleges, 2 independents, 2 publics, and 1 health. I'd make a recommendation to delete the independent colleges for this fiscal year and move that time up to additional community colleges. I know the community colleges are budgeted at $400 apiece, and you've got $500, so I don't know what to do with the remaining.
You could put the remaining 100 in the ARA funds.
Well,
Actually,
or actually, you can
contingency.
put it in board and management requests at move that up to 500. And again, we'll continue to look at it. As a side note, this document here, well, this full 50-ish page document is an annual requirement, so we won't be seeing anything as large on a quarterly basis, but this particular page 45 is going to be submitted to AOC on a quarterly basis, where you're going to have the actual time compared to the budget. So we can see not only will we receive the issued audit reports, but we'll also be able to benchmark the actual time against the budgeted and see if we're on track and so on and so forth. And if we want to make any adjustments to the plan, the committee can certainly do so during the course of the year. Yes, Mr.
Just a question. On your recommendation, is there anything, and I don't know, is there anything that requires that we are looking at TEG every year? Because that means we wouldn't be looking at any institutions with TEG funds. That's my only question. That means that TEG would go completely unaudited for the course of a year in terms of private institutions. It's not a statement, that's a question. Tony, can you answer that?
The only thing we do the only work that we plan on doing on TG this year is just a follow up on the activity, on the audit that was issued in 2009. So I think if they implement that, those audit recommendations, I think we can leave TG till 2011.
The only reference in the 2009 summary that I see to TEG is in the follow-ups.
Yes, sir.
Where we had, among several other, or a handful of other items.
Yes, sir.
Total follow-up was only 102 hours.
Yes, sir.
Was there any TEG auditing outside of the follow-ups for fiscal year 2009?
No, we do not have any audit. But if you want us to audit TG, we can always adjust the audit work plan.
I guess my question, Tony, is I guess I'm confused. When you say you're recommending 2 independent colleges and universities for financial aid and enrollment audits, I mean, if it's financial aid, it's going to be predominantly TEG, isn't it? I mean, what other financial aid or we could be auditing that's going through the independents?
That's it.
And so I guess what I'm hearing you say is, if you do that, are you just going to do enrollment audits there? That's where I'm confused.
Oh, okay. For
if you do independent colleges, I assume you'll have to be looking at TEG.
Yes, sir. If we do independent colleges, we will look at TG and the college access loan, and be on time. Those are the 3 financial that we look at.
Wait, I think that needs clarification. The independents would be only financial aid audit.
Yes.
It would not be enrollment because they do not receive any formula funding.
That's right.
And that's why you have it budgeted at less hours per entity?
Yes, that's why.
Well, Madam Chairman, you're wanting to put more hours into community colleges. Is that related to the fact that that's where 75% of the enrollment growth is happening, and therefore there's more potential? There's also 50 community colleges.
Yes, and I think we've seen some instances in the past where we've had situations that need to be corrected. Also, when you have large percentage of enrollment growth at entities, there's a risk associated with percentage growth. So that's another reason. And the number of students.
Well, I think it's a good recommendation, notwithstanding we don't feel like we've got any obligations on the independent universities and colleges from what we've historically done in terms of TEG.
We could do one.
Do one?
If you're willing to accept that compromise.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Is that?
We do one independent college, Tony?
Yes, sir.
So that we look at TEG.
Okay, so we change that to 250.
That theoretically doesn't give you enough hours to do
Yeah.
3 community colleges, but
Is there a way, perhaps, as we're monitoring this quarterly, that we keep it the way it is and then start moving excess hours to community colleges as we go along?
Possibility.
I would hate to see us just skip one category.
Yeah, all right.
I mean,
We can do that.
Yeah, my only concern, that's how much are we funding TEG? 112, something like that,
Something like that.
per biennium.
All right, well, let's leave it where it is, and, midpoint through the year, we'll look at where we're at and if we need to redirect. We can redirect based on where the hours are used.
Right, because over time, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Community colleges audits have got to increase in terms of sample size.
Okay,
Do that.
let's continue.
And the remaining pages are the discussions of the work plan, how we arrive at the proposed hours, and the background to the internal audit work plan, and the risk assessment methodology is on page 50.
And on the risk assessment, and this is an important part because this is the data that feeds into how the audits are selected. Talk to us a little bit about, I'm assuming there are standards that you're required to use to put together a risk assessment, and were those standards abided by? And also, is there, the second part of the question is there a review or a consultative discussion with SAO and or KPMG in terms of the risk assessment methodology?
There is a set of standard by the internal Institute of Internal Auditors, and we did use that methodology, and that is contained on page 50. So in terms of consultation, I was in constant consultation with the State Auditor's Office, and trying to understand their own methodology. And as a matter of fact, we did ask them for them to share their risk assessment with us, so that we can leverage some of the things that they are doing. But we were not successful in getting hold of their methodology, of their risk assessment. But they did share with us some of the things that the factors that they use in coming up with the risk assessment. And those are listed on page 51, which is the materiality size of the budget outside the regulatory agency, the complexity of operation, legislative and management interest, the quality of controls, and the organizational changes. And when it came to the risk assessment for the institution, we also met, talked to the State Auditor's Office, and the factors that we use here is after we had visited with them, and those are listed on pages 51 and to 52. The one that changed this year is the enrollment growth that we showed on page 52, and before we were using enrollment growth, anything more than 20% was a 1, and so we decided to flip it around. And I also share the risk assessment with the State Auditor's Office and also with KPMG. Now, the appendices 1 and 2 are the actual risk assessment as they breakout. The Appendix 1 is the one for the agency operations. Basically, this one is not the one that we use for the institutional audit. The one for the agency operations, we have the auditable activities. These are functions, programs, and projects within the agency, and after consulting with KPMG, one of their recommendations was that the risk factors that we use should be broken into two. Some of them should be used by management, and of course the others should be, three of them should be used by internal audit. So what we had done was to ask management to rank the auditable units in terms of using those the first five risk factors, which are the size of the budget, the outside regulatory agency, complexity of operations, management, legislative and management interest, quality of controls, and organizational changes. And the internal audit then rank all the auditable units in terms of audit intervals, audit issues, and history of fraud. So that was how we came out with the total scores. And the last column that on the risk assessment, which is entitled reference to the audit plan, basically means that those auditable units are already included in the work plan. For example, number 2, the one for formula funding, is part of our work plan for 2010. And the community college funding, the formula funding, that is also part of the 2010.
Tony, can you tell us how you have your your planned hours allocated across these three sort of risk levels, risk categories? As opposed to by project or category? I mean, line items that you show. Like how many hours are going to those areas that you assess at 3.15 and higher versus those at the lowest end?
The hours that we have allocated for them is based on the risk factors. We know that the institutional audit is very important. So those are the one with the 250 to 400 hours, and the rest of the projects there we try to allocate 240, 360, or 380. It depends on where the hours fall, because you know that you want to do those audits, so you just have to try to see if 200 or 240 will be adequate for those projects, while still able to cover those risks.
So I realize that an individual audit may involve items that are high, medium, and low.
Yes, sir.
So even if it's just a ballpark idea, I'm just curious. It's sort of taking a look at it from a different cut of the matrix, if you will, of the 6,000 plus hours. What percent would be focused on the high risk?
On the high risk, if we look at that, we can say that at least more than 50% of the hours are going to be focused on the high risk. The first section, which is the institutional audit, we plan on spending for 42% of the hours there. So if we look under the agency of operations, so we had a couple of them there, we would definitely be more than 50% of the hours going to fall within the high risk.
I think you do somewhat of a cross-reference too. I'm looking on page 45, the risk assessment auditable unit number, and though they're not grouped together,
that ties to those
Yeah.
color-coded.
yeah, so the highest risk is 35, 1 to 35. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so then the risk assessment auditable unit numbers, the ones that are 0 to 35 is in that high.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
All right. I could sort it out according to the high risk, high, low risk, and see how it's going to fall out. But it will definitely be more than 50%.
Madam Chair, can I ask a question really quickly?
Yes.
Tony, on page 52, when we're talking about financial aid expenditures, if number 5 indicates the highest risk, and this just is for my own understanding,
Yes, ma'am.
why would the highest risk be what appears to be the lowest financial aid expenditures versus the 10 million plus being the lowest risk?
The one with more than 500,000, we gave it a 5 ranking because we assumed that there will be a lot of risk there. But if we also look at the enrollment on page 51, that could be working counterclockwise. But we just assume that with a larger number of dollars, there will be a lot of risk.
There will be a lower risk, you said?
A lot of risk.
Oh, a lot of risk. Okay.
Yeah, that's why we give it a 5. But at the same time, in terms of the enrollment that we gave a 1, it's our assumption that those institutions they do have enough resources to address some of the risk that they may have.
Okay, so they have their own standardized processes that make it, okay,
So
less risky.
It will balance each other out.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I would just, suggest that if we find ourselves in the same situation in fiscal year 10, we're unexpectedly spending more hours on other issues that we, and this may be what you did this last year, we take those hours from the lowest risk areas, which are the only ones identifiable on page 45 are category 2, items 6, 9, and 12, based on the RAU auditable, the unit number. Those all fall in the low risk categories. So that, that's 240 plus 240. That's 480 hours if you have to buy 480 hours. Let's start there.
Well, it's my understanding, and I do want clarification on this. On the educational research centers, I understand the concern there is security, but also, is it correct that we're under a signed agreement of some sort or a contract to do some sort of security review there?
Contract.
Or a signed, or a
Are we
obligation,
obligated?
Oh,
an
yes.
obligation of
Yes, sir.
some
Yes.
sort?
Well, let me clarify. We're under obligation to conduct the reviews of the educational research centers themselves. It's not quite as clear whether we're required to do the VPN access to that data at other locations. It was my belief, because we have a unique model in the U.S., to continue the comfort level of the U.S. Department of Education, that we should conduct reviews of those VPN access points as well. In case question, I anticipate we would only need to do that this one time. But our agreements only cover the actual physical locations at UT Dallas, UT Austin, and Texas A&M. The requirement that we have with the federal government.
So there is a requirement for these 8 centers that we perform some sort of security review and compliance check in this fiscal year? And only in this fiscal year?
Yes, but there are only 3 centers. The other locations are access points for partners in those centers. So, for example, UT Dallas is one center, but they have partners in the Dana Center at UT Austin. They have
Well, if we have an obligation, we have an obligation. He's got 3 centers times 80 hours each. I don't want to drill down into that much detail. I was just trying to suggest, if we believe in these risk assessments, that we align that with where we have to reallocate hours should that need occur.
But we also have the 5 centers at 40 hours, number 9.
Correct.
Those are the other.
And what I was trying to clarify is that contractually, we only have to do the 3 universities.
Okay.
But to provide additional access to the partners.
The obligation would be to item 6, but not to item 9, is what you're saying.
And in terms of the obligation, is that an obligation for an internal audit department to do, or is there a way that, is it even feasible for another area in the agency, another staff department, what have you, to perform this function, or is it best suited for internal audit to perform this work?
Well, I believe it's feasible if Arturo would make his security expert in IT available, and he does participate in these, that he could conduct these additional access points.
Okay, so we can go ahead and leave the hours budgeted the way they are.
I wasn't recommending that we not.
But what I'm hearing here is there may be an opportunity actually to take it off of internal audit and shift it somewhere internally, if that's a possibility. I know we have, the ARA funds and a lot of other things going on, but it sounds like that's something that you'll explore.
I would be comfortable doing that.
Okay.
We can do that. In fact, as David mentioned, our security officer has participated in those reviews in the past, and I feel very confident that we can turn it over to him.
That's good news.
And part of that confidence is because the good audits that were done at the 3 key points.
Terrific. Okay. Any other questions?
Move approval.
We have a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries. Risk assessment, that was 6B. Okay. Okay, 6C1. Okay, agenda item 6C1. Is this the last agenda? Yes. It is?
The audit, 5 things under it.
The last items on the agenda are the audit reports. These reports were sent to you under separate covered. The There was one report listed on the agenda that has been withdrawn. That is the financial aid and enrollment audit at Tarrant County College District. So Mr. Tegby will now present the other 4 reports.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. The first audit report is from the auditor of the Teach for Texas Loan Repayment Program. It is in the Salmon, it is on, it contains on the Salmon colored paper. Our conclusion was that the coordinating board provided $4,803,720 to $995, or 21% of the eligible teachers under the program. We noted area for improvement in the for program monitoring, controls over social security number data, and the security access to the program databases. We are happy to inform you that management has accepted our recommendations, and they have even started to implement some of the recommendations.
This doesn't require a motion, does it?
It does not. It's an information item only. Any questions on any of the reports? Thank you, Mr. Tegby. And with that, this concludes the Committee on Agency Operations meeting. May I please have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Thank you very much. Good evening. It's 5:45 p.m.